Positivism. In December 1911, the Second Mendeleev Convention was opened by a paper read by Professor N. A. Umov, under the title, The Characteristic Features and Problems of Contemporary Natural Scientific Thought. Note that all of the material which follows, when quoted, is directly attributed to Umov's paper of December 1911. Quoting therefrom, let us remember the profession of faith of the natural scientist, to know the architecture of the world and, in this knowledge, to find a basis for creative foresight. This foresight inspires confidence that natural science will not fail to continue the great and responsible work of creating, in the midst of old nature, a new nature. The need for stability in daily life and the brevity of personal experience as compared with the evolution of the earth, led men to faith and create the mirage of the stability of the surrounding order of things. The creators of natural science do not share this tranquil point of view. At the present time, the constellations in the sky of our science have changed and a new star has shone forth, having no equal in brilliance. Persistent scientific investigation has expanded the volume of the knowable to dimensions that were inconceivable even a short while ago. The new that has been discovered provides a sufficient number of images for the construction of the world, but they destroy its old architecture, and can only be incorporated in a new order, the free lines of which extend far beyond the limits not only of the old external world, but also beyond the fundamental forms of our thinking. I had to lead you to the summits from which open up perspectives which fundamentally reform our idea of the world. The ascent toward these summits amid the ruins of classical physics presents considerable difficulties. The axioms of mechanics, namely classical Newtonian mechanics, are but fragments, and making use of them is equivalent to judging the content of a whole chapter by means of a single sentence. In this new, post-Newtonian world, matter has disappeared, and in place of the customary material world there takes shape before us the vastly different electromagnetic world. However, even recognition of an electromagnetic world has not disposed of many insoluble problems and difficulties. The necessity of a unifying system is felt. The deductions of Lorentz, made in 1909 and referring mainly to electro-optical phenomena, gave impetus to the publication by Albert Einstein of his unifying principle, the principle of relativity. Quoting further, we approach the summit of modern physics and find it is occupied by the principle of relativity, the expression of which is so simple that its all-important significance is not immediately evident. It says the laws of phenomena in a system of bodies, for an observer connected with it, appear to be the same whether the system is at rest or is moving uniformly and rectilinearly. It follows hence that by the aid of phenomena taking place in a system of bodies with which one is connected, the observer is unable to discover whether this system possesses a uniform progressive motion or not. Thus, no phenomenon taking place on Earth enables us to discern its progressive motion in space. The principle of relativity includes in itself the observing intellect, which is a circumstance of greatest importance. The intellect is connected with a complex physical instrument, the nervous system. Consequently, this principle gives indications concerning things which take place in moving bodies, not only in relation to chemical and physical phenomena, but also in relation to phenomena of life and therefore also to the quest of man. All spatial measurements involve time. We cannot define the geometrical form of a solid moving in relation to us, we always define its kinematic form. Therefore our spatial measurements actually take place in a four-dimensional manifold. When the cult of a new god is born, his word is not always clearly understood and its true meaning becomes revealed in time. I think that the same is true also as regards the principle of relativity. Matter represents a highly improbable event in the universe. This event, matter, came into being because improbability does not mean impossibility. End quote. We are present at the funeral of old physics, said Professor Umov. The new physics will be one that does not contain motion, i.e. in which there is no dualism of matter and vacuum. By taking the universe as thought and consciousness, we become free of the idea of a vacuum. The idea of the existence of the visible and the hidden sides of life was known to philosophy long ago. Phenomena were regarded as only one aspect of the world, and as being infinitely small when compared to the hidden aspect, seeming but not existing really and arising in consciousness at the moment of its contact with the real world. Another side, noumena, was recognized as really existing in itself, but inaccessible to our receptivity. However, there is no greater error than to regard the world as being divided into phenomena and noumena, to conceive of phenomena and noumena as being apart from one another and susceptible to being separately known. This is a philosophical illiteracy which shows itself prominently in dualistic spiritualist theories. The division into phenomena and noumena exists only in our minds. The phenomenal world is simply our incorrect perception of the world. As Karl Duprel stated in his works, the world beyond is this world, only perceived strangely. It would be more accurate to say that this world is the world beyond perceived strangely. Kant's idea is quite correct, in stating that the study of the phenomenal side of the world will not bring us any closer to the understanding of things in themselves. The thing in itself, that is the thing as existing in itself, independent of us. The phenomenon of the thing is the thing in such semblance as we incorrectly perceive it. The example of a book in the hands of an illiterate savage shows quite clearly that it is sufficient not to know about the existence of the noumenon of a thing, the contents of the book in this case, in order that it shall not manifest itself in phenomena. On the other hand, the knowledge of its existence is sufficient to make possible its discovery with the aid of phenomena which, without the knowledge of noumenon, would be perfectly useless. You would possess an object in your hand, the contents of which would remain a complete mystery. Just as it is impossible for a primitive to attain an understanding of the nature of a pocket watch by a study of its phenomenal side, the number of wheels and the number of teeth in each gear, then so too for the positivist scientist studying the external manifestation of life, its secret raison d'etre and the aim of separate manifestations will be forever hidden. To the primitive a watch will be an extremely interesting, complex but entirely useless toy. Somewhat after this manner, a person appears to the scientist materialist, a mechanism infinitely more complex but equally unknown as regards the purpose for which it exists, and the manner of its creation. We picture to ourselves how incomprehensible the functions of a candle and a coin would be for a plane being, studying two similar circles on its plane. In like manner, the functions of a human being are incomprehensible to a scientist, studying him as a mechanism. The reason for this is clear because the coin and the candle are in actual fact not two similar circles, but two different objects having an entirely different use and meaning in that world which is relatively higher than the plane. A human being is not a mechanism, but something having an aim and meaning in the world relatively higher than the visible one. The function of a candle and of a coin in our world are for the imaginary plane being an inaccessible noumenon. It is evident that the phenomenon of a circle cannot give any understanding of the function of a candle, and its difference from the function of a coin. However, two-dimensional knowledge exists not only on a plane. Materialistic thought tries to apply it to real life. A curious result follows, the true meaning of which is unhappily incomprehensible to many people. One such application is the economic man, which is clearly the two-dimensional and flat plane being, moving in two directions, those of production and consumption, i.e. existing on the plane of production-consumption. How is it possible to imagine man in general as such an obviously artificial being? Then how is it possible to hope to understand laws governing the life of a man, with his complex spiritual aspirations and great impulse, to know and to understand everything around him and within himself, by studying the imaginary laws of an imaginary being upon an imaginary plane of supply and demand? The inventors of this theory alone possess the secret of the answer to this question. However, the economic theory of human life attracts men as do all simple theories giving a short answer to very complex questions. We are ourselves too entangled in materialistic theories to see anything beyond them. Positivistic science does not really deny the theory of phenomena and noumena. It only affirms, in opposition to Kant, that in studying phenomena, we are gradually approaching the noumena. The noumena of phenomena, science considers to be the motion of atoms and the ether, or the vibration of electrons. It conceives of the universe as a whirlpool of mechanical motion, or the field of manifestation of electromagnetic energy taking on a phenomenal tint for us in their reception by our organs of sense. Positivism affirms that the phenomena of life and psychic phenomena are simply the functions of physical phenomena. That without physical phenomena, the phenomena of life, thought and emotion cannot exist, and they represent only certain complex combinations of the foregoing. Furthermore, it asserts that all three of these types of phenomena are one and the same thing in substance, that the higher, i.e. the phenomena of life and of consciousness, are only different expressions of the lower, of one and the same physico-mechanical or electromagnetic energy. To all of this it is possible to answer only one thing. If it were true, then it would have been proven a long time ago. Nothing is easier than to prove the energetic hypothesis of life and the psyche. Just create life and thought by the mechanical method. Cyborgs are androids like the Terminator, Data, in Star Trek, and Romy, of Andromeda remain science-fictional fantasy and have no basis outside of the imagination. Materialism and energetics are those obvious theories that cannot be true without proofs, simply because they cannot lack proof if they contain even an iota of truth. The simple fact of the enormous liberating and unbinding force of psychic phenomena is sufficient to establish the problem of the world of the hidden. The world of the hidden cannot be the world of unconscious mechanical motion, and of the unconscious development of electromagnetic forces. Positivistic theory admits the possibility of explaining the higher through the lower, the invisible through the visible. However, as was pointed out at the beginning of this discourse, this is simply attempting the explanation of one unknown by means of another unknown. There is still less justification for attempting to explain the known through the unknown. That lower matter and motion, through which positivism seeks to explain a higher life and thought, is itself unknown. Consequently, it is impossible to explain or attempt to define anything else in terms of it, while the higher, i.e. the thought, is our sole known. It is this alone that we do know, that we are conscious of in ourselves, and that we can neither mistake nor doubt. If thought can evoke or unbind physical energy, and motion can never create or unbind thought, because out of a revolving wheel no thought ever arose, then so of course we shall strive to define not the higher in terms of the lower, but the lower in terms of the higher. If the invisible, like the contents of a book or the purpose of a watch, defines by itself the visible, then so too we shall endeavor to understand not the visible but the invisible. Starting from the false assumption of the mechanical character of the noumenal aspect of nature, positivist science makes yet another mistake in examining the law of cause and effect, or the law of function, namely it mistakes what is cause for what is effect. The positivist view studies the visible world or the phenomena of the visible world, refusing to admit that causes not contained in this world could have penetrated into it, or that phenomena of this world could have functions outside it. If we take into consideration the phenomena of life and thought, we are forced to admit that the chain of phenomena very quickly passes from a purely physical sequence into a biological sequence. We must admit too that in the reverse transition, into the physical sequence from the biological and psychological spheres, actions proceed precisely from those sides that are hidden from us, i.e. that the cause of the visible is the invisible. We are bound to admit that it is impossible to consider chains or sequences solely in the world of physical phenomena. To be more concrete, physical phenomena, in becoming the object of sensations of sight, hearing, touch, smell, provoke physiological phenomena and then psychological phenomena. Phenomena of consciousness are accompanied by physiological phenomena, which in turn gives rise to a series of physical phenomena. Again, we cannot consider chains or sequences solely in the world of physical phenomena. Since events, even the most distant from one another in time, are in contact with the fourth dimension, this means that in reality they take place simultaneously, as cause and effect. Today's events were yesterday's ideas and feelings, tomorrow's events lie today in some person's suffering or dreams. The world of physical phenomena represents a section of another world which also exists here, and the events of which take place here, but invisibly to us. Each thing has an infinite variety of meanings, and to know all these meanings is impossible. In other words, truth, as we understand it, i.e. the finite definition, is possible only in a finite series of phenomena. In an infinite series it is bound somewhere to become its own opposite. This means that every knowledge is conditional. We can never embrace all the meanings of any one thing. All that is highest in the understanding, to which we may come of the essence of a given phenomena, from another still higher point of view, will again have a different meaning. And there is no end to it. Side by side with our view of things, another view is possible, a view as it were from another world, from over there, but over there signifies not another place, but another method of perception. For us, our perception as regards the external aspect and form of the world is extremely incorrect. We know that the world consists of solids, but we always see and touch only surfaces. We never see or touch a solid because a solid is a concept. Behind the surfaces we think the solid. But we can never represent a solid to ourselves. We cannot represent a cube or a sphere from all sides at once. We represent solids in perspective. Yet the world does not exist in perspective. Still we are unable to see the world in any other way. In perceiving the world, we distort it with our eye. A child tries to touch everything it sees, the nose of its mother, the moon or reflected light on the wall. It learns only gradually to distinguish between the near and the far by sight alone. Our eye distorts the external world in a certain way, to enable us to determine the position of objects relatively to ourselves. In practice we are constantly introducing corrections into what we see. These corrections are made by reasoning, which is impossible without concepts. How many more illusions would we see if we were unable to mentally unravel the causes which produce them, and were to regard everything as existing exactly as we see it? I see it, therefore it is. This assertion is the main source of all illusions. The right way to put it would be, I see it, therefore it is not so. We can say this, but animals cannot, because for them whatever they see, is. Mathematics of infinite and variable or fluent magnitudes, such as transfinite, i.e. beyond infinity numbers, deals with the real relations of real magnitudes. There are no finite and constant magnitudes in nature, which are but sections of reality, conditional abstractions. If we could know a man's body as a whole, as an infinite line from birth to death, then we would know that it is an absolutely constant magnitude with all its variety of forms, states and positions. But in that case the axioms of our mathematics would not be applicable to this constant magnitude, because it would be an infinite magnitude. The sensation of infinity is the first and most terrifying trial before initiation. There is nothing. The small insignificant soul feels itself suspended in an infinite void. Then even the soul itself ceases to exist. There is nothing, there is only infinity, the constant and continuous breaking up and dissolution of everything. In the mystical literature of all peoples there are references to this sensation of void and darkness. The old is vanishing, receding, becoming unreal. Yet ahead there is only the unknown, terrifying in its infinity. In order not to experience this terror, the mind must be prepared. The new world must be known beforehand, and the old world of matter must be voluntarily renounced. Even so, there is no end to the process of always seeing things from a still higher point of view, in a still wider generalization. Choose thou thy work, for all souls must labor, never be free from the pathway of light. One step you have gained on the long pathway upward, infinite now is the mountain of light. Each step you take but heightens the mountain, all of your progress but lengthens the goal. Approach ye ever the infinite wisdom, ever before you recedes the goal. This is the majesty and terror of infinity. Not many of us think that the soul ceases to exist in infinity, but rather we need to think carefully what a soul is. Maurice Maeterlinck speculated in his book Death, asking what would a person born deaf, blind and mute think of his so dearly held gloomy world of bodily sensations if one day all his senses would be healed. Would he think he has lost the most important part of his personality, or would he revel in the new wonderful world he miraculously found?